Okay, let's start. Number 1. The graves beneath. The deepest canyon on Earth is beneath Antarctica. The Denman Glacier Trough descends 11,500 feet below sea level, almost twice the depth of the Grand Canyon at its deepest measured point. It sits in permanent darkness beneath 2.5 miles of ice. No one has ever seen it, and until 2019, nobody knew it was there. In 2019, a project called Bed Machine Antarctica, led by Matthew Morlighem at the University of California, Irvine, pointed ice-penetrating radar at the continent and produced the most detailed map of what lies beneath the ice sheet that has ever been made. The project drew on data from 19 research institutes, combined decades of radar surveys from aircraft and ground stations, and assembled them into a single, high-resolution image of the subglacial terrain. What that image revealed changed the way scientists understood the continent. Beneath the ice, hidden from every satellite photograph and every surface survey in history, was an entire landscape. Not a flat bed of compressed rock, which is what the earlier models had assumed. A full topography of peaks, valleys, and ridges comparable in scale and complexity to anything on the exposed surface of any continent. Mountain ranges that no human eye has ever seen. River channels carved by water that stopped flowing millions of years before the first tool was made. And canyons so deep that when the team published their findings in Nature Geoscience in December 2019, the numbers broke what geologists thought was possible. No exposed canyon on the surface of any continent comes close to what Morlighem's team found beneath the ice. Think about that. The deepest valleys on Earth are valleys no one has walked through, no one has seen with their own eyes. They exist in permanent darkness, sealed under ice that has been building for over 30 million years, beneath a continent that receives less than 2 inches of precipitation per year, surrounded by the coldest and most isolated environment on the surface of the planet. They have been there, in total darkness, for longer than the human species has existed. And until 2019, nobody knew what they looked like. But here's the detail that everyone missed at the time. The Book of Enoch, a text composed in stages between roughly the 3rd century BC and the 1st century BC, preserved in the Ethiopic gaze tradition and translated into English by R.H. Charles in 1917, contains a passage in chapter 10, verses 11 through 14, in which God gives the archangel Michael a set of instructions. Those instructions are not vague, not allegorical. They are mechanical. Bind Semjaza and his associates who have united themselves with women, so as to have defiled themselves with them in all their uncleanness. And when their sons have slain one another, and they have seen the destruction of their beloved ones, bind them fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth, till the day of the consummation of their judgment. The valleys of the earth, not the surface, not the mountains, not the deserts or the seas. The valleys of the earth, plural, as though the prison was not one location but a landscape of them, a network of sealed chambers carved beneath the surface of the planet. And the deepest of those valleys, the ones that have been sealed in darkness for tens of millions of years, sit beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. The sentence is 70 generations. Not forever, not destruction, not annihilation, 70 generations, until the day of judgment. That is a containment order with an expiration date. God did not destroy the Watchers named in this passage. He did not erase them or cast them into fire. He bound them and placed them in the deepest structure the earth contains, and he set a clock. The prison was designed to hold, not to punish. Whatever is being held there was considered too dangerous to destroy and too dangerous to leave uncontained. And the container has been sealed, beneath ice, in darkness, at the bottom of the world, for longer than the human species has existed. But the Book of Enoch does not just describe what is buried down there. It describes what is guarding the way in, and that part is still true. The valleys, though, are not the strangest thing beneath the ice. Scattered across the continent, sealed in total darkness, are more than 400 bodies of water that have not been touched by the outside world in 15 million years. The largest one sits under nearly 2.5 miles of ice. It is roughly the size of Lake Ontario. And in 2012, a Russian drilling team that had been boring through that ice for over 20 years finally broke through to the surface of that lake. What came up the borehole was not what they expected. Number 2. The Locked Waters. February 5th, 2012. Vostok Station, East Antarctica. A Russian drilling team that had been boring through the ice sheet for over 20 years finally broke through. The drill punched into something that was not ice, not rock, but liquid water, sitting beneath 12,366 feet of frozen material, sealed from the surface of the planet for somewhere between 15 and 25 million years. The lake they had reached was called Vostok. It was roughly 160 miles long, 30 miles wide, comparable in size to Lake Ontario, and it existed in total darkness under pressure of approximately 350 atmospheres. The water was kept liquid not by any surface warmth but by geothermal heat rising from the rock beneath it. A body of water the size of one of the Great Lakes, sitting under 2.5 miles of ice, warmed from below by the earth itself, untouched by sunlight or open air since before the genus Homo existed. And no, I'm not making that up. 350 atmospheres. That is roughly the pressure you would experience if you descended 11,000 feet into the open ocean. Except above Lake Vostok, the crushing weight comes from solid ice, 2.5 miles of it, frozen layer on frozen layer, pressing down with a mass that has been accumulating for longer than any human civilization has measured time. When the drill broke through, water from the lake rushed up the borehole under its own pressure and froze almost immediately on contact with the colder ice above. The Russian team recovered ice core samples from the refrozen water and found trace microbial DNA. But the results were contested. Drilling fluid had been used to keep the borehole from collapsing, and the possibility of contamination from that fluid meant no researcher could confirm whether the DNA belonged to organisms living in the lake or to material introduced by the drilling process itself. A clean, uncontaminated sample from Lake Vostok has never been conclusively obtained. Whatever lives in that water, if anything does, has not been positively identified. What comes next is the part that still doesn't make sense. Lake Vostok is not alone. As of surveys catalogued through 2020, scientists have identified more than 400 subglacial lakes beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, 400 sealed chambers of liquid water scattered across the continent, most of them never drilled into, never sampled, never directly observed by any instrument that has touched their surface. Some are connected by subglacial channels. Others sit completely isolated, sealed on all sides by ice and rock. An entire hidden network of locked water, sealed in darkness, sitting beneath a continent that the rest of the world treats as empty. The Book of Enoch, chapter 18, verses 14 through 16, describes what Enoch saw when he was taken to the ends of the earth. The passage reads, "And I saw a terrible place which had no firmament of the heaven above, and no firmly founded earth beneath it. There was no water upon it, and no birds. But it was a desert and a terrible place." And then, in the verses that follow, Enoch sees a limitless abyss, where 7 stars of heaven were bound together, rolling over fire, a sealed abyss at the edge of the world. A place of confinement, without sky, without ground as the surface knows it, and without the water that belongs to the living world. The match extends beyond geography into time itself. Among the watchers assigned to this prison, the Enochian text names Barakeel, who taught astrology, the art of reading the future through the stars. A being whose identity is built on the ability to see what is coming next, locked in a place where time itself has been frozen. Lake Vostok has not changed in 15 million years. No seasons reach it, no weather touches it, and no cycle of growth or decay has turned inside its waters since the ice sealed it shut. For a being defined by its knowledge of the future, the prison strips him of the one thing his nature requires, a future to observe. 15 million years of the same pressure, the same temperature, the same darkness, the same moment, repeated without variation, until judgment. God did not destroy the beings the text places in this prison. He locked them in water that does not move, beneath ice that does not melt, in a place where nothing changes and nothing arrives. The punishment is stillness, and the stillness has lasted longer than any measurement of time the human mind was built to hold. But Lake Vostok is a sealed body of water. The next thing the Book of Enoch describes beneath the ice is something harder and older than water: rock. Rough, jagged rock, placed there on God's direct orders, with instructions so specific they read like a construction manual. And in 1958, the Soviets found exactly that, buried under more than a mile of ice, in a place the text calls Dudael. Number 3. The Teeth of Dudael. God spoke to the angel Raphael, and the instructions were precise. Bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness. Make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudael, and cast him therein. And place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face that he may not see light. That is 1 Enoch chapter 10, verses 4 through 6, word for word. These are not general sentencing guidelines or metaphors. They are mechanical instructions, step by step, for building a prison. Bind him. Open a hole in a specific location. The location has a name, Dudael. Throw him into it. Pile rough and jagged rocks over him. Cover it all in darkness. Seal his face so that no light reaches it. And then the final clause, let him abide there forever. Not 70 generations. The watchers named in the previous passage, Semjaza and his associates, received 70 generations in the valleys of the earth. Azazel received forever. The text distinguishes between the two sentences, and the reason is in chapter 10, verse 8. The whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. Pay attention to that detail, because it explains everything that follows. Azazel's crimes are listed in chapter 8, verses 1 and 2. He taught men to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates. He taught women the use of antimony, cosmetics, the beautifying of the eyelids, precious stones, and dyes. He introduced sorcery and the cutting of roots. The list reads like a curriculum. Metallurgy, vanity, warfare, sorcery. Each one a separate category of forbidden knowledge, and each one attributed specifically to Azazel. He did not just teach one prohibited skill. He taught the infrastructure of civilization as a vehicle for corruption, and the text holds him personally responsible for the total result. You would think someone would have said something. Nobody did. The word Dudael appears nowhere else in known biblical or parabiblical literature. Scholars have searched for it across centuries. Some have connected it to the Beth Hadudo mentioned in the Mishnah's Yom Kippur ritual, a cliff in the Judean desert where the scapegoat was thrown, but the Enochian description does not match a desert cliff. It describes rough and jagged rocks sealed in darkness, beneath the earth, forever. The location is named, the features are described, and for 2,000 years, nobody knew where it was. In 1958, the Soviet Antarctic Expedition's Third Continental Expedition made a discovery beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet that nobody had predicted. Using seismic sounding equipment, they detected a massive subglacial mountain range buried under approximately 1.1 miles of solid ice, the Gamburtsev Mountains, roughly 750 miles long. Jagged alpine peaks, comparable in scale and ruggedness to the European Alps, with elevations reaching nearly 10,000 feet, and valleys carved between them by ancient glaciers that have not flowed since the ice sealed them. They had been sitting there, in total darkness, for an estimated 34 million years, since the ice sheet first formed over them during the Eocene-Oligocene transition. The discovery was confirmed and expanded by the AGAP project in 2008 and 2009, which deployed ice-penetrating radar and airborne gravity surveys to map the range at high resolution. The results showed exactly what the seismic data had indicated. A full-scale mountain range, jagged, rough, alpine in character, buried in permanent darkness under miles of ice. The peaks are sharp enough that the researchers compared them to the Matterhorn. No human eye has ever seen them. No human hand has ever touched them. They have been sitting in the dark since before the first primate walked upright. Rough and jagged rocks, covered in darkness, sealed forever, beneath a desert of ice where no light reaches. The Gamburtsev Mountains match the physical description that the Book of Enoch provides for Azazel's prison, rendered in geological reality beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. A mountain range nobody knew existed, described in a text written 2,000 years before the instruments to detect it were invented. The only watcher who received forever instead of 70 generations is locked, according to the text, in the most extreme prison on the list, and the ice keeps getting thicker. The ice has been thickening for millions of years and shows no sign of reversing. Whatever is beneath it is getting further from the surface with every passing year, pushed deeper by the weight of ice that will not stop accumulating. If you are still here, hit subscribe. We are not even halfway through what is down there. Jagged rocks beneath the ice, that is what the text described for one prison. But the next description is different. Enoch does not describe rocks. He describes 7 stars like great burning mountains, bound in a terrible place of chaos. And in 2006, a satellite detected something 300 miles across beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet. To this day, nobody can fully explain what it is. Number 4. The 7 stars. In 2006, a team led by geophysicist Ralph von Fries at Ohio State University was analyzing data from GRACE, the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment, a pair of satellites that map gravitational variations across the Earth's surface by measuring the distance between them as they orbit. Gravitational anomalies indicate mass concentrations beneath the surface, and what the GRACE data revealed beneath the Wilkes Land region of East Antarctica was enormous. A gravitational signature, roughly 300 miles across, buried under more than a mile of solid ice, consistent, according to von Fries's team, with either a buried impact crater or a subterranean structure of unusual density, something massive, circular, and hidden beneath the ice in a region that has never been drilled into, never been directly sampled, and never been accessed by any instrument that touches what it is measuring. If you are wondering how something that big stays hidden, so is everyone else. 300 miles across is larger than the state of South Carolina. The structure sits beneath the ice in one of the least explored regions of the most remote continent on Earth, and the only reason anyone knows it is there is because the gravity field above it does not behave the way it should. Von Fries's team connected the anomaly to the Permian-Triassic extinction event, roughly 250 million years ago. That extinction was the largest mass die-off in the history of the planet. Approximately 90% of all marine species and 70% of all terrestrial vertebrate species were wiped out. The cause has been debated for decades, with leading candidates including massive volcanic eruptions in the Siberian traps and a large bolide impact. The Wilkes Land structure, if it is an impact crater, is a candidate site for that impact. Something hit the Earth hard enough to kill nearly everything on it, and the scar is still buried beneath Antarctic ice. That was only round one. In 2017, a team, led by Maximilian van Wyck de Vries at the University of Edinburgh, published a study in the Geological Society of London's special publications that identified at least 138 volcanoes beneath the US's West Antarctic ice sheet. Previous estimates had counted a few dozen. The Edinburgh team used ice-penetrating radar and satellite imagery to catalog volcanoes that sit entirely below the ice surface, invisible from above, undetectable, without instruments that can see through miles of frozen water. The concentration they found makes the region beneath the West Antarctic ice sheet the densest volcanic province on the planet. Denser than the East African Rift Valley. Denser than any volcanic chain on any continent's visible surface. Some of these volcanoes are potentially still active, fire beneath ice, in permanent darkness, scattered across a region that humans could not reach for the vast majority of recorded history. The Book of Enoch, chapter 21, verses 3 through 6, describes what Enoch saw when he was taken to another prison at the ends of the earth. And I saw 7 stars like great burning mountains, and to me, when I inquired regarding them, the angel said, "This place is the end of heaven and earth. This has become a prison for the stars and the host of heaven. And the stars which roll over the fire are they which have transgressed the commandment of the Lord in the beginning of their rising, because they did not come forth at their appointed times. And he was wroth with them, and bound them till the time when their guilt should be consummated. Stars, burning mountains, fallen from the sky, bound at the ends of the earth in a place of fire and chaos." The text is describing the same kind of event from a different frame. Something fell. Something burned. It was bound at the edge of the world. And the Enochian text says God put it there because these entities transgressed at the beginning, because they did not follow the order they were given. The transgression preceded the burning and the binding. The prison contains the evidence of what it punishes, a mass extinction event that killed 90% of marine life, 138 volcanoes in permanent darkness beneath ice, a gravitational anomaly 300 miles across that nobody has ever directly examined. The text says burning mountains were bound in a terrible place. The geology says burning mountains are still there. And the reason God put them there, according to the text, is that they broke the order of creation at the beginning. What followed, the destruction, the fire, the extinction, was the consequence. And the consequence is still sealed beneath the ice. Valleys, sealed water, jagged rocks, burning mountains. Every feature so far has been geological. Ice, rock, fire. But the Book of Enoch does not just describe the prisons. It describes what lived on the earth before the prisons were built. And Antarctica was not always ice. 260 million years ago, it was covered in forests. The trees are still there, fossilized, standing upright. And the beings, the text says, walked among them, left something behind when they died. Number 5. The Nephilim remains. A team of geologists from UW-Milwaukee climbed frozen slopes at McIntyre Promontory in the Transantarctic Mountains and found what should not have been there. Fossilized fragments of 13 trees, preserved in rock that dated to the end of the Permian period, over 260 million years old. The trees belonged to the genus Glossopteris. They had grown between 65 and 131 feet tall. On Alexander Island, off the west coast of the Antarctic Peninsula, other researchers found fossil tree logs up to 23 feet high, still standing upright in the position they had grown, dating back 100 million years. Standing trees, fossilized in place, on a continent now buried under miles of ice. Almost nobody talks about this part. Antarctica was not always frozen. It was not always a desert. During the Eocene epoch, roughly 56 to 34 million years ago, the continent supported dense subtropical and near-tropical forests with essentially frost-free winters. A study published in Nature in 2012 confirmed persistent near-tropical warmth on the Antarctic continent during the early Eocene. In 2024, Science Advances published evidence of a large-scale transcontinental river system that crossed West Antarctica during that same period. Rivers, forests, warmth. Temperatures warm enough for palm trees and baobabs to grow within a few hundred miles of the South Pole. Before the ice came, Antarctica was a living, forested, river-crossed landmass connected to what is now South America and Australia. Animals lived there. Plants grew year-round. It was part of the world, connected to the other southern continents, warm, forested, and alive. And everything on it was buried when the ice arrived. The ice sheet began forming roughly 34 million years ago during the Eocene-Oligocene transition, when the Drake Passage opened between South America and Antarctica, and allowed the Antarctic circumpolar current to isolate the continent from warmer ocean water. The glaciation was sudden by geological standards, a climatic shift that sealed an entire continent's surface under ice that has been building ever since. Whatever lived on that continent before the ice, whatever walked its forests and drank from its rivers, is now preserved beneath the sheet or destroyed beyond recovery. The fossil record proves the land was alive. The ice proves it was buried. The Book of Enoch, chapter 7, verses 2 through 5, describes what walked the earth before God intervened. And they took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one. And they began to go in unto them and to defile themselves with them, and they taught them charms and enchantments. And they became pregnant. And they bare great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them, and devoured mankind. The text continues, in verse 5, And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. And somehow, it gets worse. The Nephilim are the reason the entire Enochian narrative exists, the catalyst that triggers everything described in the rest of the text. Chapter 8, verse 4, describes the cry of the earth reaching heaven, and the souls of men made their suit, saying, Bring our cause before the Most High. The violence of the Nephilim, their consumption of everything, their turning on the human population that could no longer feed them, is the event that triggers the divine response. The Watchers fell. They taught forbidden knowledge. They took human wives. But the appeal to God, the moment that starts the entire chain of imprisonment and judgment described in the rest of the text, comes from the suffering caused by their children. The Nephilim were the catalyst. The text says these beings were physical. They had bodies. They ate. They bled. They destroyed. And the continent that preserves the fossil record of the era they inhabited, the continent where forests grew and rivers ran, and the land was warm enough to sustain life on a massive scale, is the same continent God chose as the prison site. The prison was built because of the Nephilim, and the evidence that the world they walked through once existed, the fossilized trees, the ancient riverbeds, the geological record of a living continent, is sealed beneath the same ice that seals the prisons described in the text. God did not just imprison the Watchers beneath Antarctica. He buried the world the Nephilim had ruined, the forests they had stripped, the land they had consumed, under the same ice. The prison and the crime scene are the same place. But the Nephilim were physical. They had bodies. They died. And the Book of Enoch says death was not the end for them. Chapter 15 describes what happened to the giants after they were killed, and it is the single most disturbing passage in the entire text. Because their spirits did not go where spirits are supposed to go, they stayed. And according to the text, they are still here. Number 6. The unburied dead. And now the giants, who are produced from the spirits and flesh, shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies, because they are born from men, and from the holy watchers is their beginning and primal origin. They shall be evil spirits on earth, and evil spirits shall they be called. That is 1 Enoch, chapter 15, verses 8 through 10, from the R.H. Charles translation. And it changes everything the previous 5 sections just described. The watchers are in their prisons. The valleys hold Semjaza and his associates for 70 generations. The jagged rocks of Dudael hold Azazel forever. The burning mountains hold the 7 stars. Every prison described so far has walls, a location, a physical structure that confines what is inside it. But the Nephilim, the offspring of the Watchers and human women, received no prison when they died, no valleys, no sealed ice, no sentence with a term. What happened to them was worse than any confinement on this list. Their spirits stayed. Chapter 15, verses 11 and 12 lay it out. And the spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth, and cause trouble. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst, and cause offenses. Read that last clause again. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst. These are entities that exist in a state of perpetual want. They cannot eat, they cannot drink. They cannot satisfy the hunger they experience, and they cannot die. They are trapped in a form of existence that has no fulfillment, no relief, and no end. And this is the part where things stopped being funny. Chapter 16, verse 1, delivers the verdict. From the days of the slaughter and destruction and death of the giants, from the souls of whose flesh the spirits, having gone forth, shall destroy without incurring judgment. Thus shall they destroy until the day of the consummation, the great judgment in which the age shall be consummated. They destroy without incurring judgment. They act without consequence, without accountability, without anyone stopping them until the very last day. No angel is dispatched to restrain them. No binding is placed upon them. No Raphael, no Michael. No divine order to contain them. The text is describing something closer to an exemption from prosecution, one that lasts until the end of the world. The Book of Enoch creates a 2-tier imprisonment system, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The first tier is the Watchers, the fallen angels who organized the descent, who swore the oath on Mount Hermon, who taught the forbidden knowledge. They are in physical prisons beneath the earth, valleys, sealed water, jagged rocks, burning mountains. They have locations. They have sentences. Semjaza has 70 generations. Azazel has forever. Their prisons have walls, and their sentences have terms. They are contained. The second tier is the children, the spirits of the Nephilim, and their punishment is the opposite. They have no prison, no sentence, no walls, no term, no location to confine them. They are bound not to a place, but to the earth itself. They cannot ascend to heaven because they are half human, born of flesh. They cannot die because they are half angel, born of spirit. They exist in between, belonging to neither world, unable to leave, unable to rest, unable to stop wanting what they can never have. The Watchers at least have the structure of a sentence. The spirits of the Nephilim have nothing but time and hunger and the earth beneath them. The parents got prisons. The children got something worse. Existence without end, without satisfaction, without judgment, without hope of resolution until the final day. Eternal hunger, no death, no judgment, no end. So yeah, not great. And the text is specific about what these spirits do while they wait. They afflict, they oppress, they destroy, they attack, they cause trouble. The Book of Enoch does not describe them as dormant. It describes them as active, present, engaged with the living world in ways that cause measurable harm. The Watchers are locked away, but their children are loose, and nothing holds them except the earth itself. According to the text, they are still here, have always been here, will be here until the last day of the age, not beneath Antarctica, not sealed in ice, but on the earth, walking it, hungry, and unable to stop. The Watchers sit in their prisons while the spirits of their children wander. But the Book of Enoch describes two more things sealed at the ends of the earth that are neither angels nor spirits. They are creatures, primordial, separated at creation and placed in two specific locations, one in the deepest ocean, one in a waste wilderness. And the locations the text describes match two features of Antarctica that exist nowhere else on the planet. Number 7. Leviathan and Behemoth. And on that day were two monsters parted, a female monster named Leviathan, to dwell in the abysses of the ocean over the fountains of the waters. But the male is named Behemoth, who occupied with his breast a waste wilderness named Dudael on the east of the garden where the elect and righteous dwell. That is 1 Enoch chapter 60, verses 7 and 8. And the next verse makes the arrangement explicit. And I besought the other angel that he should show me the might of those monsters, how they were parted on one day and cast, the one into the abysses of the sea, and the other unto the dry land of the wilderness. Two creatures. Not angels, not watchers, not human, not spirits. These are a different category entirely. The text calls them monsters, primordial beings that existed before the fall, before the oath on Mount Hermon, before the Nephilim consumed the earth, and they were placed, not imprisoned, separated on the same day and assigned to two specific locations. One in the deepest part of the ocean, one in a waste wilderness. And the timing of what happened next? Almost too perfect. The southern ocean surrounding Antarctica contains the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the strongest ocean current on the planet, moving roughly 137 sverdrups, roughly 36 billion gallons of water per second, in an unbroken ring around the entire continent. No landmass interrupts it anywhere in its full circuit. It functions as a moat, a wall of moving water that keeps warm ocean currents from reaching the continent and keeps the ice sheet from melting. The deepest parts of the Southern Ocean plunge past 23,000 feet. Leviathan, according to the text, dwells in the abysses of the ocean over the fountains of the waters. The Southern Ocean is the deepest, most violent, most unbroken body of water surrounding any continent on the planet, and Behemoth occupies a waste wilderness named Dudael. The name Dudael, like Dudael before it, appears nowhere else in known literature. Scholars have never identified the location, but the description that follows it is precise: a waste wilderness. Antarctica is the largest desert on Earth by area, larger than the Sahara. It receives less than 2 inches of precipitation per year. The interior temperature at the South Pole averages minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind speeds in katabatic storms routinely exceed 100 miles per hour, scouring the surface bare. The interior is so dry and so cold that it qualifies as a polar desert by every measurement available. The text says Behemoth occupied a waste wilderness with his breast, which implies he did not just live there but covered it, lay across it, pressed his body against the land itself. A waste wilderness in every measurable sense of both words, and one that has been waste for longer than any human language has existed to describe it. The distinction the text draws is deliberate, and it matters. The watchers were punished. Azazel was bound hand and foot and thrown into darkness. Semjaza and his associates were sealed in valleys for 70 generations. Those are prison sentences for crimes committed. But Leviathan and Behemoth were assigned, not sentenced for crimes, separated at creation and placed at the boundaries. One in the ocean that surrounds the prison continent, one in the wasteland that covers it. The text treats them as infrastructure, not inmates. They are standing guard. Leviathan patrols the water surrounding the continent. Behemoth occupies the land. Between the two of them, nothing approaches from the sea and nothing crosses the surface. They are not locked in. They are locking everything else out. God did not just build prisons for the watchers. He stationed creatures at the perimeter. The ocean is guarded. The land is guarded. And the beings doing the guarding are primordial monsters, placed there before the prisons were needed, as though the locations were chosen for the prisons precisely because the guardians were already in position. The guardians were already in position when the first prison was built. If this is your kind of rabbit hole, hit subscribe. There are 3 more of these, and the last one is the one I cannot stop thinking about. So, here is where things get dark. Because the text does not stop at what is beneath the ice and what guards the ocean, there is something wrong with the sky above Antarctica. The angel who taught humanity the signs of the sun was sealed beneath the one place on Earth where the sun's own radiation breaks through the atmosphere with an intensity it reaches nowhere else. And scientists did not discover the breach until 1985, and when they did, they found out their own instruments had been seeing it for years and throwing the data away because nobody believed the readings could be real. Number 8. The torn firmament. In 1985, 3 scientists at the British Antarctic Survey noticed something wrong with their instruments. Joe Farman, Brian Gardner, and Jonathan Shanklin had been measuring ozone concentrations above Halley Station in Antarctica using ground-based Dobson spectrophotometers that tracked ultraviolet absorption in the atmosphere. The numbers had been declining for years, but what they found in the 1984 data was something no atmospheric scientist had anticipated: a collapse. Ozone levels above Antarctica had dropped to roughly 2/3 of the values recorded in the 1960s, concentrated in the lower stratosphere during the austral spring, September through November. When they published their findings in Nature on May 16, 1985, they revealed that the sky above Antarctica had a hole in it, not a thinning, a seasonal depletion so severe that it exposed the surface below to levels of ultraviolet radiation found nowhere else on Earth. But the version you have heard? That is not the full picture. NASA's Nimbus 7 satellite had been collecting global ozone data from orbit for years using the total ozone mapping spectrometer, and the readings it was gathering showed the same depletion the British team had measured from the ground. But NASA's quality control software had been programmed to flag and discard readings below a certain threshold as instrument errors. The satellite had been seeing the hole the entire time. The software was throwing real data away, because nobody had imagined ozone could drop that far. The sky above Antarctica was already torn open, and the machine designed to watch the sky was deleting the evidence because the truth looked like a malfunction. The ozone hole reforms every year, specifically over Antarctica. It has appeared above the South Pole with varying severity every austral spring since it was first detected. No equivalent hole exists over the North Pole. The conditions that drive it, the polar vortex, the extreme stratospheric cold, the isolation of the air mass above the continent, are unique to the South. At the peak of the annual depletion, the ozone column above the South Pole drops to less than 1/3 of its normal value. That is not a typo, by the way, less than 1/3. The UV index at the surface spikes to levels the rest of the planet is shielded from. The sun's radiation pours through the atmosphere above Antarctica with an intensity it reaches nowhere else on Earth. According to 1 Enoch chapter 8 verse 3, the angel Shamsiel taught humanity the signs of the sun. His name translates directly from the Hebrew as Son of God or Light of God. He revealed the patterns and signs encoded in the sun's behavior, knowledge that in the Enochian framework was never meant for human comprehension. The mechanics of the sun, its cycles, its effects on the earth, were divine architecture maintained by angels. Shamsiel broke the seal on solar knowledge, and his prison, like every other watcher on this list, is at the ends of the earth, beneath Antarctica, sealed in darkness, until the day of judgment. Shamsiel, sealed beneath the one place on earth where the sun breaks through the sky itself, where the atmosphere behaves as though something tore a hole in it and the hole keeps reopening every year, in the same place, over the same continent, above the same ice. Antarctica has 6 months of continuous darkness at the pole, and 6 months where the sun never sets. And during the transition between those extremes, the ozone hole opens and ultraviolet radiation floods the surface with an intensity the rest of the world is protected from. The firmament in the Enochian framework is part of God's construction, part of the architecture that holds creation in place. The sky is a barrier, a structure, a built thing with gates and portals described elsewhere in the text. A tear in that barrier directly above the prison may not be an accident. Either the prison is leaking something upward that weakens the sky above it, or the opening was placed there on purpose. Either way, the result is the same. The sun reaches the surface above this continent harder and more directly than it reaches any other surface on the planet. The prison for the angel who taught the signs of the sun sits beneath a sky that lets the sun through. Valleys beneath the ice, sealed water, jagged rocks, burning mountains, giants, wandering spirits, beasts in the ocean and the desert, a torn sky. Every one of these was described in a text written over 2,000 years before anyone set foot on Antarctica. And then, in 1946, the United States sent the largest military force ever assembled for a polar mission to this exact continent. They were supposed to stay 6 to 8 months. They left after 8 weeks. And when the man in command came home, he said something to a Chilean newspaper that nobody has ever fully explained. Number 9. The Last Binding. In December 1946, the USS Philippine Sea steamed south from Norfolk, Virginia, carrying the largest polar expedition in human history, Operation High Jump, Task Force 68, commanded by Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a man who had already been to both poles and whose name was synonymous with Antarctic exploration. The force numbered 4,700 men, 13 ships, including an aircraft carrier and a submarine, and 33 aircraft. The mission was planned for 6 to 8 months, long enough to carry them through the Antarctic winter. The objective, as publicly stated, was to establish a research base, train personnel for cold weather operations, and extend American sovereignty claims over portions of the continent. They left after 8 weeks. The official explanation cited the onset of Antarctic winter, deteriorating ice conditions, and the loss of a PBM Mariner seaplane designated George I, which crashed on December 30th, 1946, killing 3 of the 9 crew members. These are reasonable operational reasons to curtail an expedition, but the timeline had already accounted for winter. The planning documents anticipated winter operations. A force of that size, with an aircraft carrier and a submarine and enough materiel for 8 months, does not withdraw after 2 months because winter arrived on schedule. But here is the detail that everyone missed. On March 5, 1947, shortly after returning to the United States, Admiral Byrd gave an interview to El Mercurio, a major Chilean newspaper. In that interview, he made a statement that has never been fully explained by any official military or government source. In the case of a new war, Byrd said, the United States would have to be prepared for an attack by planes that could fly over one or both poles. Read that again. The man who had just commanded the largest Antarctic military operation in history came home and told a South American newspaper that, in the event of a new war, the threat would come from the poles. Not from the Soviet Union, not from Europe or Asia, from the poles. He did not elaborate. No follow-up interview on that statement was ever published, and no official explanation of what prompted a decorated admiral to frame the polar regions as a military threat has ever been released. What happened 12 years later would reshape the continent's future and the future of every nation with an interest in what lies beneath the ice. 12 years after Operation High Jump, on December 1st, 1959, 12 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty. The treaty designated the entire continent south of 60 degrees latitude as a zone reserved exclusively for peaceful scientific purposes. It banned all military activity, prohibited nuclear testing and the disposal of radioactive waste, and established a framework for free access to scientific research under heavy institutional oversight. No nation can claim sovereignty over any part of the continent. No military operation can be conducted on its surface. The treaty now has 56 signatory nations. Antarctica is, by a wide margin, the most regulated and restricted territory on Earth. An entire continent, sealed by international agreement, monitored by dozens of nations, and closed to military presence by binding treaty. According to 1 Enoch chapter 8, verse 3, the angel Armaros taught humanity the resolving of enchantments. In the Enochian framework, enchantments are divine constraints, bindings placed by God to maintain the cosmic order. The word enchantment in the Charles translation renders a concept that means a seal, a lock, a binding that holds something in place by divine authority. Armaros taught humans how to break those bindings, how to undo what was meant to hold, how to resolve what God had locked. The angel who taught humanity to break divine bindings is imprisoned, according to the text, at the ends of the earth. And the ends of the earth, the continent the text describes as a prison, is the one piece of land the modern world agreed to bind by international law. 56 nations signed a treaty that says no military force may operate there. No sovereignty may be claimed. The continent is locked, by human agreement, by treaty, by the same species that was supposedly taught by Armaros how to break such locks. The irony of that arrangement, if the text is describing something real, is the kind of symmetry that does not happen by accident. Armaros, imprisoned on the one landmass that humanity chose to bind. Valleys, water, rocks, fire, giants, spirits, beasts, a torn sky, a treaty. 9 descriptions from a book written 2,000 years ago, and 9 matches beneath a continent nobody should have known existed. But the Book of Enoch describes one more thing at the ends of the earth. Not a prison, not a creature, not a binding. A passage, a gate. And the question the whole list has been building toward is whether that gate is real, whether it is still shut, and what sits on the other side of 600 miles of the roughest water on the planet. Number 10. The Forbidden Passage. 600 miles of open water. No land to break the wind, no reef to slow the current, no shelter between Cape Horn at the southern tip of South America and the South Shetland Islands, roughly 100 miles north of the Antarctic Peninsula. The Drake Passage. By wide consensus, the roughest body of water on the planet. Waves routinely reach 40 to 50 feet. Wind speeds regularly exceed force 12 on the Beaufort scale, which is the maximum the scale was designed to measure. The passage sits where the Atlantic, Pacific, and Southern Oceans converge with nothing solid in any direction to interrupt the energy those three bodies carry. Sailors who have crossed it describe swells taller than buildings, winds that do not pause, and a horizon that never stops moving. Modern vessels with steel hulls and GPS navigation still treat the crossing as one of the most dangerous on Earth. Before the age of powered ships, no human civilization on Earth had any reliable way to cross it. The passage was not just difficult to cross. For most of recorded human history, it was impassable. And this is the part of the story that has been building since the beginning. The Antarctic Circumpolar Current flows through the Drake Passage as part of its unbroken circuit around the entire continent. It is the strongest ocean current on the planet, moving approximately 36 billion gallons of water per second through a channel that never closes. No landmass interrupts it anywhere along its full route. It formed roughly 34 million years ago, when tectonic activity opened the Drake Passage as South America separated from Antarctica, and its formation is what triggered the glaciation that sealed the entire continent in ice. The current that guards the passage is the same current that built the prison. It isolated Antarctica from warmer ocean water, dropped the surface temperature, and created the conditions for an ice sheet that has been growing ever since. The gate and the prison were created by the same event. The Book of Enoch, chapter 33, verses 2 and 3, describes what Enoch saw when he was taken to the boundaries of the world. And to the east of those beasts I saw the ends of the earth whereon the heaven rests, and the portals of the heaven open. Chapter 34. I went towards the north to the ends of the earth, and there I saw a great and glorious device at the ends of the whole earth. I saw 3 portals of heaven open in the heaven, through each of them proceed north winds. And, chapter 36, verse 1. I went to the south, to the ends of the earth, and saw there 3 open portals of the heaven. Enoch describes portals at the ends of the earth in every direction, and the south, the direction of Antarctica, has its own portals, gates at the bottom of the world. The text does not describe them as closed or locked. It describes them as open portals through which forces of nature move: wind, water, weather. The Drake Passage is the gate. It has always been the gate. 600 miles of the roughest ocean on the planet, driven by the strongest current on the planet, sitting at the one point where any traveler from any other continent would have to cross to reach the prison continent. And it has been there for 34 million years. The Book of Enoch describes what is buried beneath Antarctica, valleys where beings are bound for 70 generations, sealed water that has not been touched in 15 million years, jagged rocks piled over the worst offender in total darkness, forever, burning mountains bound in a terrible place of chaos, giants whose violence consumed the earth, spirits of the dead who cannot die, wandering the surface of the planet in perpetual hunger until the last day, primordial beasts stationed as guardians in the ocean and the wasteland, a torn sky that lets the sun's radiation through harder than anywhere else on the planet, a treaty signed by 56 nations that sealed the continent by human law, and a gate at the end of the earth that has been shut for 34 million years, guarded by a current that has not stopped flowing since the day it began. That is 10 descriptions from a single ancient text. The question that remains is why a single book written over 2,000 years ago describes a continent that no one in the ancient world should have known existed and gets the physical details right. The valleys are real. The sealed water, the jagged mountains, the volcanoes, the fossils, all real. The ozone hole is real. The current and the passage are real. And the ice that holds all of it together has been building, year after year, for longer than the human species has been alive. And every single one of those features was described in a text that was already ancient before the first ship sailed south of the equator. Tell me which one you think is the most convincing. Drop it in the comments. And if you made it this far, subscribe.